All right, Dennis Shanahan, you've been much missed. Welcome back, and welcome back to a crisis here engulfing New South Wales Labor. Now, this has been a decade-long saga for New South Wales Labor. It doesn't get better, it just seems to get worse. What's been your reaction to these events?
Well, look, it is, as Anthony Albanese says, diabolical for Labor. It couldn't come at a worse time for the Labor Party. They've lost state and federal elections in New South Wales. They are once again under the hammer for questionable donation practices. It's all tied in with the issue of Chinese influence, the removal of Senator Sam Dastyari previously. It's all coming together. And what it's coming together in a platform or a theatre where it's just unravelling day by day, and the stories are just unbelievable. Clearly, ICAC believes some of the evidence is unbelievable. This is big trouble. It's a continuation of a tradition in New South Wales Labor of hiding donations, accepting donations. Look, this goes back, I've seen some people writing commentary during the week saying, oh, you know, it wasn't always this bad. When I was at the state government reporting for the Sydney Morning Herald, I remember an ALP General Secretary, New South Wales Secretary, having to be suspended. And for what? Taking a cheque in relation to a donation from a banned donor. This is not new. You'd think by now they would have got it right, and it just reeks of a complete lack of oversight and a belief that they can get away with anything. I mean, a bag of $100,000, this takes the brown envelope back in the Queensland days to new heights. A shopping bag full of money. This is terrible for Labor, and Anthony Albanese can do little about it.
Well, Anthony Albanese was once an Assistant General Secretary in New South Wales, and I guess when he says, I'll wait for the next 5 weeks of evidence to be tabled before I decide, or the party decides where we go from here. I think the problem, Dennis, is if you look at the honour roll, if I can call it that loosely termed, of all the General Secretaries that Labor's had and Assistant General Secretaries in the case of Anthony Albanese, they tend to go from that job in New South Wales into the Parliament. And so many MPs in the Parliament, state parliaments and federal parliaments could be embroiled in all of this. If this is only week one, what we have behind us, Ernest Wong's already out of the Parliament, Kayla Monahan, everyone said she'd end up in Parliament, she was such a leading light, well, she's gone. Where is this going to end up, and is it going to end up taking down federal scalps?
Well, this is the issue, of course, particularly in relation to Chinese influence. There is, of course, the allegations that Sam Dastyari, while a senator, informed the donor, who has since been banned coming to Australia, that he may have been under ASIO surveillance. Are these issues going to be explored as part of the wider issues, as part of the cash issues? This has got a long way to go. And look, I can remember when Anthony Albanese was there as a young speaker at the ALP conference in New South Wales, campaigning against alleged malpractice in the branch. And you know what one of the solutions was? They sold the building and shifted it. So it's not a new idea from Kristina Keneally. It's one that's been tried before and hasn't worked.
Yeah, but how about they just obey the law? I mean, these guys make the laws in the parliaments. I listened last week, incredulous as it was, to Labor person after Labor person come on the various programs and commentate that we needed to have changes in disclosure laws, we needed to ban donations full stop and only have public funding for election campaigns. Kristina Keneally's bright idea just to move out of Sussex Street as if it all goes away. The law is the law is the law. If they just abided by the law, they wouldn't have to have all these other changes to donation practices to get around the fact that they just can't obey the law.
Well, it seems to be a chronic problem. And look, personally, I think we should have public funding. I don't think individually funded political campaigns are a good thing. And I think that if we had just public funding, we wouldn't be as inundated with material as we are. But that's beside the point. There are laws, they have to be obeyed, and if they're not, you get caught and that's what's happening.
All right, let's get into the issue of the Tamil family, because I wrote about it on the weekend in the papers yesterday. There's a lot of sympathy for this family. I understand they're living in Billawheeler. They've knitted into the local community. The 2 children were born in Australia, but of course, the law in Australia, under Australian law, under the Migration Act, if you're not born to Australians, no matter where you're born, if you're born in Australia to people on visas, in this case bridging visas, because they arrived illegally, it does not make you an Australian citizen. Both these the mum and dad, both parties to this family, the relationship, the adults, came separately. The dad first in 2012 paid people smugglers. Mum came later in 2013. They have been looked at and assessed by the court on 7 occasions, been found not to be refugees. The elder of the 2 young children, her case was looked at. She was rejected. Because the younger child, the 2-year-old, was not in that original case, activists have had another go around here. But Scott Morrison, he had some comments today. Actually, I'll go to Peter Dutton first, because he lays out the arguments, and then we'll go to the Prime Minister.
They've been to every court, right up to the High Court. They've been told that they're not refugees. Now, I understand the compassion shown by many, but we have to look at this case on its merit. There's no indication at all that's been given to this family, including before they had children, that they would ever settle in this country. So over a period of time, both Minister Coleman and myself have looked at this case, and it's completely without merit in terms of their claim to be refugees.
It's not about the public mood. It's about what is the right decision in Australia's national interests to ensure that the integrity of our border protection regime is maintained. Because just like when Kevin Rudd thought it was all right to get rid of temporary protection visas in August of 2008, and then 50,000 people turned up on 800 boats and 1,200 people died, I'm sure he felt that it might have been the humane thing to do.
All right, Dennis, they are the human face of the Rudd-Gillard mess. Still in Australia 4 years on, having used the courts as they've tried to stay in this country. Time's up. The courts have made their decision. But yet we're still in the place where we saw on the weekend protests and claims today that Scott Morrison isn't Christian if he doesn't let them stay.
Yes, look, I've seen some classic own goals in politics over the years, but I've never actually seen a double own goal in the space of 24 hours. And Labor has done that. They've done it deliberately, and they've done it, I think, completely hypocritically. They've attacked the government for turning away a lovely family. Clearly, everyone who knew them liked them. There is no problem, no suggestion that these people are doing anything other than living a good life. However, they were told at the beginning, they came to Australia when Labor changed the laws. Labor allowed them to come to Australia, and they were part of the 50,000 people who came, who are still being cleared up. Now, it's all very well, and it's understandable, and it's heartrending. However, when you get down to the last few people, it is easy to say, oh, look, there's only half a dozen. Let's change the law. Let's use ministerial discretion. Immediately, the people smugglers will start an advertising campaign and say, it's all right, get on the boat. You might have to spend a bit of time in the courts, but you'll get to stay in Australia. This is the sad truth, and this has been part of the truth of this issue over the last 20 years, and thousands of people have died as a result. Now, there is no time for compassion if you actually start to encourage people smugglers. Now, so Labor is picking on their own problem here and saying, oh, let's make an exception. The second own goal here is not just the hypocrisy of Labor trying to say, oh, look, let them stay, after they have exhausted every possible avenue. And it's the courts here that have said they are not refugees. And both the Prime Minister and Peter Dutton have said today, if they want to apply and come back to Australia, they can, and rightly so. But the second own goal is to try and then line up Scott Morrison's Christian beliefs as some sort of argument as to why he's being hypocritical in not allowing the family to stay. This is extraordinary behaviour from the Labor Party. On the one hand, they're accusing him of being too religious and trying to introduce, extreme right-wing religious protections and legislation. And on the other hand, they're saying he's not Christian enough. But the base argument here to say that a Prime Minister's beliefs or no beliefs, whether it was Bob Hawke's atheism, which led to him to change the immigration laws to try and stop illegal boat arrivals, or Kevin Rudd's Christian beliefs, which led him to take a more humane approach, is immaterial. These are policy decisions which have been voted on a number of times by the Australian population as recently as this year and endorsed. And so I think that Labor is really scraping the bottom of the barrel with this argument, intellectually and ethically.
Yeah, well, just on that point, I'm going to put a graphic up of Kristina Keneally at a rally in Sydney yesterday, standing behind a poster that says, "Scott Morrison, you're a fake Christian." It reminds me of the old Ditch the Witch posters, that if you stood in front of the posters, even if you didn't know what went up, while you were facing the other way, you were somehow condemned by it. I wonder if Kristina Keneally will apologise there to Scott Morrison. But I also want to play a grab of what she had to say, because this is also very telling. Let's have a listen.
And I say this explicitly, as a Christian Australian, my message is to our Christian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. Open your heart. Understand what the gospel calls us as Christians to do. It is the parable of the Good Samaritan, where we welcome in our land the stranger, where we treat them with compassion and kindness. This is an opportunity for him to show Christian leadership.
I tell you, you cannot win if you're a Conservative. You're condemned if you're Christian in the case of Israel Folau for speaking his Christian values. You're condemned if you're Scott Morrison from abiding by the law and what he knows personally when he was the Immigration Minister, Dennis, personally about border changes that cost lives at sea. You're condemned as not being Christian enough if you try and stop those deaths at sea by holding fast to policies that you brought in, that you had to fix up Labor's mess, that you know work. I think this really... And look, and you're not allowed to be Christian when it comes to abortion. You're not allowed to be Christian when it comes to euthanasia or all the other issues. Labor really like to pick and choose Christianity and what it marries up to with policy.
Indeed, and I don't know where Kristina Keneally's been over the last 15 years while this policy's been fought out, because Labor changed its positions. Labor reopened offshore processing on Nauru and Manus. Labor admitted that it wasn't just pull factors, that it wasn't just push factors, that it was pull factors, that changing the laws attracted illegal boat arrivals. So I don't know where Kristina Keneally's been on this, and it is evidence of the fact that while we're actually having now and will next week a debate about religious freedom legislation, it's because not that we've been very happy for the last 100 years or so of the Constitution with the constitutional religious freedom that was supplied. What is happening now is a reaction, like the Israel Folau case, where people are fighting back to defend religious rights which are being undermined and overtaken and being used as weapons in some cases politically to actually limit religious freedom. So the religious freedom debate, this is typical of the way that picking and choosing arguments and policies are used to undermine religious beliefs.
Yeah, classic case of Labor overreach from Kristina Keneally, who, as you said, what was she doing in the last 15 years? She was sitting in Parliament with Eddie Obeid in her party room. That's what she was doing for the last 15 years. Anyway, Dennis Shanahan, Got a nice mind for a Monday. I'm not going to let it go downhill from here on in. We'll get back to the break. And thank you. Great to see you. You look well. You look rested. I'm sure you had a wonderful time in Italy, but great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Peter.